The National Football League is the world's most profitable sports organization. They bring in more than $20 billion in annual revenue. 75 out of the top 100 most watched cable TV shows in the United States last year were NFL games. And they dominate other US sports leagues like the NBA, MLB, NHL, and MLS when it comes to average franchise valuations. The appeal is obvious. You have 200-pound plus men crashing into each other at 40 times the force of gravity. But that physical style of play doesn't come without consequences. For example, more than 320 former NFL players, including Demaryius Thomas, Aaron Hernandez, Vincent Jackson, Ken Stabler, and Frank Gifford, have been diagnosed with CTE post-mortem, and the NFL has paid out nearly $1 billion in concussion settlements alone. Combine that with the fact that tackle football participation in the United States is declining at an alarming rate, and the NFL itself is investing millions of dollars annually in flag football, and people are starting to wonder what the NFL's future might look like. But is the NFL's investment in flag football a sign of bigger changes to come? Or is it simply another intelligent business move by the world's most profitable sports organization? This is the story of why the NFL is investing millions of dollars in flag football. What's up, everyone? Just a quick interruption to let you know that Manscaped is sponsoring this episode. They're offering 20% off of all their products at manscaped.com/huddleup. So make sure to go check them out and enjoy the rest of this episode. The National Football League was founded in 1920 when 10 local athletic clubs gathered in Canton, Ohio to create the American Professional Football Association, now known as the NFL. But playing professional football 100 years ago did not carry the same prestige and financial opportunity that it does today. The game was seen as a hobby for college athletes that continued to seek a competitive and physical outlet after their playing days. The original teams were branded by athletic clubs and sponsored by employers, and from 1920 to 1930, more than 46 organizations came and went. Baseball was still America's favorite sport, but the main problem was that NFL players were being paid less than $100 per game on average, and no one saw professional football as a legitimate and secure way to make a living. But that changed in 1925 when University of Illinois running back Red Grange signed a groundbreaking deal with the Decatur Staleys, who are now known as the Chicago Bears. Red was a 3-time consensus All-American in college, which provided him with the leverage to negotiate a deal with the Bears that earned him a salary and share of gate receipts that amounted to $100,000. Red then made his NFL debut on Thanksgiving Day at Wrigley Field in Chicago, just 10 days after his final college game. He rushed for 92 yards and even had an interception in front of a crowd of 40,000 at Wrigley Field. But more importantly, the sold-out crowd proved to everyone that there was a growing desire amongst US consumers for the game of tackle football. Fast forward a couple of decades, and the NFL continued to grow. The failure rate amongst franchises began to slow dramatically, and the league expanded geographically, with new franchises popping up in major cities like Atlanta, Boston, Dallas, Denver, New Orleans, Los Angeles, and Miami. But the most pivotal moment in NFL history came in 1966, when the NFL agreed to merge with the American Football League, its main competitor. This created one unified league across the United States, and with more than half of the US population now having access to a television, the sport experienced tremendous growth. That growth has enabled the NFL to become America's most popular sport today. For example, the NFL is expected to bring in around $20 billion in revenue this year. That's a 300% increase over the last 2 decades, and it's roughly equal to the combined annual revenue of the NBA and MLB, America's second and third most popular sports. Furthermore, more than half the US population of 335 million people will watch an NFL game this year, and the NFL recently signed new media rights agreements with CBS, NBC, Fox, ESPN, and Amazon that are collectively worth about $110 billion over 11 years, or $10 billion annually. And with regular season games now averaging more than 17 million viewers, the NFL has also quietly become the preferred choice for advertisers on television, with 30-second commercials costing about $400,000 for a regular season game and $7 million for the Super Bowl. But while many things seem to be going right for the NFL domestically, they have long faced challenges when trying to grow the game internationally. For example, out of the NFL's $20 billion in expected revenue this year, less than 5% of that will come from sources outside of the United States. So while other sports leagues, like the Premier League, who recently signed a $2.7 billion US media rights deal with NBC, and Formula One, which went from hosting 0 races in America a decade ago to now hosting 3 races annually today, have found success outside of their domestic markets, the NFL has not. Of course, this isn't for a lack of effort. The NFL hosted its first international game nearly 100 years ago, and from 1960 to 2005, they played 47 exhibition games at international locations all around the world, including games in England, Japan, Canada, Germany, Spain, Ireland, Sweden, Australia, and Mexico. The NFL also launched the International Player Pathway Program in 2017, which is designed to provide elite international athletes the opportunity to compete at the NFL level. And they even financially subsidized NFL Europe for nearly 2 decades, despite the league continuously losing money and making little to no progress when it came to building up European interest in American football. But the NFL's biggest investment by far is the International Series, which launched in 2007 and guarantees that regular season games are played in locations like London and Mexico City each year. In total, the International Series has placed 33 regular season games abroad over the last 15 years, and 5 NFL regular season games will be played internationally this year alone, with games taking place at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and Wembley Stadium in London, Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, and now, for the first time ever, Allianz Arena in Germany. But still, even with 5 regular season NFL games being played in international markets each year, league offices being set up in the UK, China, Mexico, and Canada, and a strict directive from Commissioner Roger Goodell to grow the business, the NFL has barely made a dent in international market compared to other global sports leagues like the Premier League, Formula One, and even the NBA. So why is that? How could it be that the world's most profitable sports league, an entity that owns an entire day of the week in a country of 335 million people, can't grow internationally? Well, this is where flag football comes in. Many people believe the biggest threat to the NFL's future is player safety, and as a result, the decline in youth participation. For example, Boston University released a study in 2017 that studied the brains of more than 200 former football players after their death, and they found that 87% of the players showed signs of CTE. And if you only included NFL players in the sample, that number jumped to 99%. Given that the long-term consequences of repetitive brain trauma can include memory loss, depression, aggressiveness, and even suicidal behavior, these medical studies have scared a lot of people. Former NFL superstar Bo Jackson, for example, has already made it clear that he doesn't want his kids playing football, telling USA Today, "If I knew back then what I know now, I would have never played football. Never. I wish I had known about all of those head injuries, but no one knew that. There's no way I would ever allow my kids to play football today, even though I love the sport." But Bo Jackson isn't just saying this. It's something that we are seeing play out in real time. For example, according to the National Federation of State High School Associations, the number of people participating in tackle football in the United States has dropped from 8.4 million in 2006 to about 5 million today. That's a 40% drop in participation, and it's something the NFL is most certainly worried about. So it's no surprise to see the NFL is heavily aligning its brand with flag football. The organization launched its own flag football league, NFL Flag, in the mid-1990s, and today, the program has over 500,000 youth athletes competing across 1,600 plus teams in all 50 states. And furthermore, the NFL recently revamped its annual Pro Bowl game, taking away the tackle football game altogether and replacing it with a 7-on-7 flag football game instead. But while many people are convinced that the NFL might eventually soften its rules or use flag football as a less violent entryway into the sport, it's becoming increasingly clear that this is really just about money. The NFL has publicly stated that they want to add more than 50 million international fans over the next decade and grow their international business to more than $1 billion in annual revenue. But that's not going to happen through a few international games each year. It's going to happen through the Olympics. The NFL is currently investing millions of dollars and making a push to have flag football included in the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. The reason for this is simple. Many of the NFL's international attempts over the last several decades have failed because the people they are trying to recruit as fans didn't grow up around the sport and have never actually played tackle football themselves. But by obtaining an Olympic charter, which requires the sport to be widely practiced by men in at least 75 countries and on 4 continents, and by women in at least 40 countries and on 3 continents, the NFL would be able to drastically expand its fan base, bringing in millions of fans through international competition. For example, Damani Leach, the chief operating officer of NFL International, told CNBC earlier this year that his goal over the next 5 years is to expand NFL flag football, also saying, "We've got to make the game matter. If flag football becomes an Olympic sport, more countries will invest in playing that sport." Of course, Olympic inclusion isn't a guarantee. The International Olympic Committee has fairly strict requirements when it comes to the addition of new sports, and there's a laundry list of other sports that want to be included as well. But the NFL is one of the most powerful organizations in sports, and if they eventually want to reach $30 billion, $40 billion, or even $50 billion in annual revenue, it's clear that they need to try a different international strategy. So don't be surprised if flag football eventually makes its way into the 2028 Olympic Games. But just know that the NFL isn't doing this for player safety. It's about expanding their brand, attracting millions of new fans, and eventually capturing billions of dollars in financial upside.